My name is Clara Whitman, and I'm 31. Oldest of three sisters, lifelong planner, family fixer, and accountant by trade. I like my coffee black, my spreadsheets color-coded, and my weekends quiet. Ethan, my fiancé, calls me strategic, which I think is just a polite way of saying I'm obsessive about control. He's calm, grounded, the one who steadies me when the world tilts sideways. Last month, the night before our wedding, we had the rehearsal dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant Ethan picked. Red napkins, string lights, the smell of garlic bread hanging in the air, and a brass drain in the middle of the floor I'd never noticed until it became the focal point of my life. The first voice you need to hear is my sister Sophie's. Relax, Clara, they're just circles. Try plastic if you're going to be such a snob. She said it loud enough for Mom to hear and for the servers to pretend they didn't. I'd taken my rings off for 30 seconds. 30. My engagement diamond with a thin pave band and the wedding band we planned to bless after dessert. I set them on a folded napkin while helping her son, Leo, clean up a ketchup disaster. Sophie was too busy filming a story titled, Practice Dinner, but Make It Fashion. Leo, 7, fast, curious, hands everywhere. He picked up the napkin, peered, and in a voice that could slice glass, said, "These are ugly." Then, as if performing some ritual, he dropped them straight into the restaurant drain. Time slowed. I lunged. Ethan was already reaching. "Leo, no," I said. Sophie laughed. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. They're insured. They'll be fine." A clink. Another. A hollow echo. Then a breath-like sound I couldn't place. My rings were gone. Ethan's voice went low, calm. Where did he put them? "In there," Leo chirped, smiling like this was a magic trick. Sophie recorded it all, her phone blinking red. I dropped to my knees on the tile, lifting the brass grate. My thumb slipped, grease, soap shadows, but Ethan knelt beside me, calm as ever. "We're going to fix this," he said. Not an option, not a hope, a fact. I nodded, feeling like I'd just stepped onto a tightrope. Behind us, Sophie laughed, waving her phone like a flag of triumph. That was the first time I realized how invisible my own boundaries had become. I had spent my whole life shrinking to fit everyone else's emergencies, paying Sophie's traffic ticket, co-signing her first apartment, buying half of Target when she cried over baby things, floating loans my mom wouldn't ask for herself. Every sacrifice was framed as being responsible, being the oldest, being lucky enough to help. And now in a tiny Italian restaurant, I watched the embodiment of all that work slip down a drain. Mom hovered, tight-lipped. Servers held their breath. Ethan assessed the plumbing like a man reading a ledger. "We'll get them back. We just need patience." I wanted to yell. I wanted to collapse. I wanted to disappear. Instead, I smiled, sharp, painful, and said, "Let's eat." And we did, with a hole in the floor and a larger one in my chest. Later that night, I lay awake, tracing the invisible scar on my wrist, where my grandmother's tiny diamonds, part of what made the engagement ring ours, had rested. I thought of every loan, every favor, every invisible fracture of self-worth I had patched over the years, and I realized something terrifying. This time, it wasn't just about rings. It was about me. Morning came, gray and hesitant. Ethan was up before me, shoes on, coffee in hand, phone in his pocket. He kissed my forehead, rubbed my shoulder. 10 minutes, we go. At 8:05, Matteo, the restaurant owner, opened early. The plumber, a kind-eyed man named Luis, pulled the trap. Grease, gray water, hair tie, penny. No rings. Everyone held their breath wrong. Then Ethan rolled up his sleeves. He plunged his hands into the sludge like a calm diver. Slow, meticulous, patient. He didn't flinch. He didn't look at Sophie's texts lighting up my phone. "I've got something," he finally said, rinsing a bent, scratched, but intact wedding band. Relief was ugly and overwhelming. I cried, loud and unchecked. Luis cautioned that the engagement ring might be deeper in the main line. Sophie posted a boomerang of clinking glasses. Pre-wedding chaos. Send vibes. Ethan didn't raise a glass. He only held me. It was the first time in years I realized that standing beside someone who sees your pain without exploiting it feels like survival. And behind it all, Sophie didn't see rings or marriage. She saw content. She saw chaos. She saw opportunity to play games with boundaries. That's when I knew something had to change. I wasn't just a sister, an aunt, a daughter, a family accountant. I was Clara Whitman. And for the first time in a long time, I was starting to prioritize me. The night after the rehearsal dinner, sleep was a stranger. I lay in bed, tracing the faint crease where my engagement ring should have sat. Every time my mind wandered to Sophie or her son Leo's little voice, "These are ugly," a familiar ache bloomed in my chest. It wasn't just the rings. It was all of it. Every time I'd been expected to absorb someone else's mess without complaint. Every time my feelings were secondary to family convenience. Ethan didn't wake me. He knew I needed to unravel in my own head. But when I finally emerged, coffee in hand, he was already in motion. Shoes on, laptop open, calm as a man who believed in solutions. He kissed my forehead and said, "We'll fix this. You don't need to carry it alone." That phrase should have sounded ordinary, but it felt like a revelation. Someone saw my panic, my exhaustion, my frustration, and didn't exploit it. Someone stood beside me without judgment. Sophie, of course, did not share that perspective. She called me mid-morning, her voice casual, dismissive. "Relax, Clara. Insurance will cover everything. Don't ruin your weekend." I stared at the phone, wanting to scream. I wanted to tell her she didn't get to wave off my anxiety as if it were a paperweight. But instead, I started documenting. Emails, receipts, screenshots of the Instagram video she'd posted, the plumber's invoice, everything, meticulously organized. It felt almost strange to treat my own boundaries like evidence. For years, I'd absorbed financial emergencies, car repairs for Sophie, babysitter logistics, surprise rent payments for Mom. I'd shrunk to make space for everyone else. Every favor, every sacrifice had become invisible. And now I was reclaiming that space. Mom called soon after, her tone tight, trying to balance sympathy with criticism. "Clara, it was an accident. Don't overreact." Ethan interjected calmly. "She's not overreacting. She's asking the adult to take responsibility." Mom's sigh traveled through the receiver like a needle through silk. I realized then how often I'd muted my own feelings to keep peace, how often I'd swallowed indignation to avoid family discomfort, how often I had been the only one taking responsibility for everyone else's chaos. Sophie's texts didn't stop. "Plastic replacements will be here by morning. You can cosplay married until the real ones show up." Each word felt like a jab, a reminder that she hadn't understood the value of what she'd destroyed, or perhaps didn't care. And yet Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't advise rage. He guided me with quiet pragmatism. "Document everything. We'll handle this, step by step. You don't need to carry the guilt anymore." For the first time, I realized the depth of my exhaustion wasn't just physical, it was emotional. I'd spent decades negotiating invisible debts, love, money, time, attention, and now, standing at the edge of a brass drain, I understood that if I didn't enforce boundaries now, I never would. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of calls to the restaurant, scheduling a plumber, and debating whether I should even confront Sophie directly. Ethan's presence was steady. He made plans, called the plumber, calculated the path to recover the rings. I followed his lead, grateful, terrified, and oddly exhilarated. That afternoon, I sat on the couch, replaying every instance of my family taking advantage of my generosity. I saw the patterns clearly now. Sophie's crises, Mom's selective support, my own compulsive need to keep peace. All of it had conditioned me to shrink and disappear, and all of it had ended that night in the restaurant. When Sophie sent another text, this time mocking the recovery plan, I typed a reply I never would have sent years ago. "At noon, we are filing a police report. At 1 p.m., insurance is contacted. Any further communication goes through email." It was crisp, factual, immovable, a line in the sand. And as I hit send, I felt a strange, heavy relief, like someone had finally untied a knot in my chest that I hadn't realized was there. Ethan squeezed my hand and said quietly, "You don't owe them an argument. You owe yourself a line." That simple sentence carried more weight than any lecture, any family guilt trip, any years of silent labor. I realized that asserting boundaries wasn't cruelty, it was survival. Later that evening, I reviewed the plumber's photos and receipts, the video Sophie had posted, and every text. I felt something new, a flicker of control. The rings were gone, but I wasn't. My anger, my anxiety, my careful calculations, they were finally being put to use for me. not for everyone else. In that moment, I started to understand that this incident wasn't just about the rings. It was about reclaiming my voice, my dignity, my right to be seen. Sophie, Mom, Leo, they had all treated my sacrifices as invisible. But now, with Ethan beside me and the plan laid out, I felt for the first time in years that I had an ally who respected me and a chance to finally demand accountability from a family that had never given it. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. By the morning after the rehearsal dinner, I knew the only way to protect myself and the remnants of my sanity was to treat the rings incident like what it was, an adult-created mess, not a child's mistake. Leo was 7, innocent in intent, but Sophie had orchestrated the chaos and laughed while filming it. That meant she bore responsibility. Ethan helped me organize everything. A folder of screenshots from Sophie's Instagram story, timestamps, the plumber's invoices, photos of the brass drain, and our insurance appraisals. We were methodical, almost surgical. Every piece of evidence became armor. When I called Sophie, her voice was breezy, as if the situation were a minor inconvenience. "Clara, relax. It's insured. Don't ruin your weekend." I swallowed hard, remembering the helplessness of my younger self, the years spent absorbing family crises. Not this time. Not negotiating over text. "We'll handle this formally," I said, my voice firm. By noon, we were at the police precinct with a printed appraisal, photos, and a timeline of the incident. The officer glanced at the folder, mildly amused. "Good documentation. Looks like you're protecting yourself, not punishing a child," he said. Ethan stood beside me, calm, attentive. He wasn't dramatic. He didn't need to be. He simply exuded steadiness. He held my hand briefly, a quiet anchor as I handed over the evidence. We followed that with the insurance call. The adjuster's voice was warm but professional as I walked her through each step. "Appraisal on file, incident report, plumber invoice forthcoming," I said, reading from my notes. She nodded, explaining the process and deductible. Sophie didn't take it well. Her texts escalated. "You're overreacting. Don't make a scene. It's just rings." Ethan replied calmly in my stead. "We're asking for accountability. She made it clear she doesn't intend to take responsibility. That's not a scene, it's procedure." For the first time in a long while, I felt the weight of years of invisible labor begin to lift. I wasn't a servant to her whims. I wasn't obligated to cushion every inconvenience. I was Clara Whitman. That afternoon, I drafted a concise email. Subject: rehearsal dinner. Incident costs. Next steps. Body: attached are the police report, appraisal, and invoices. Please review. Moving forward, all communication on this matter will be conducted via email. Sophie replied, almost immediately from her hair salon. "Apparently I'm not paying for your princess meltdown. Don't email me again unless it's an apology." I stared at the message. 10 years of covering her mistakes, 10 years of quiet compliance, and now she mocked me. I showed Ethan. He simply nodded. "Not yours to fix. That's her problem." I let the voicemail from Mom go unanswered. She left 3 messages, a mix of disbelief, concern, and the usual mix of criticism and advice. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. A week later, the insurance company approved a partial payout pending recovery attempts. The deductible, $2,000, was ours, unless Sophie contributed. That was her choice, not mine. The emotional freedom that came from accepting that I didn't have to finance her irresponsibility anymore was intoxicating. In group texts, the narrative spun into chaos. Cousins, aunts, even strangers on social media commented on how unfair it was to punish a child, on Clara being jealous of Sophie's free spirit. I didn't screenshot. I didn't need to collect pain like stamps anymore. I had my documentation, my plan, and Ethan. For the first time, saying no didn't taste bitter. Each refusal, no more babysitting without notice, no more lending money, no more invisible work, was a small reclaiming of self. Not cruel, not vengeful, necessary. Ethan's presence never wavered. When the first check from insurance arrived, when Sophie refused to engage in accountability, when Mom tried to guilt me, he simply held my hand and whispered, "We're in this together." That night, as I traced the tiny scratches on the bent wedding band Ethan had retrieved from the drain, I realized something. The rings were a metaphor for everything I'd endured. Precious, scarred, yet intact, resilient. And so was I. The day of the small claims hearing arrived with a crisp, bright intensity that made me feel exposed. I dressed carefully, shoes that didn't squeak, a blazer that was simple but strong. Ethan walked beside me, steady as a pillar, holding the folder that contained every bit of evidence. Sophie arrived late, wearing a sweatshirt with a slogan that read, "Chaotic good," as if to flaunt her carefree attitude. She glanced at me once, a mix of disdain and faux familiarity, as though we were strangers on a bus, forced into proximity. The judge called the room to order. Sophie's opening statement was dramatic, her voice dripping with manufactured distress. My sister caused me unbearable stress the day before my child's rehearsal dinner. I suffered migraines. She publicly shamed me. Emotional trauma, defamation. She even cried at the end, delicate tears that framed her carefully. The judge didn't flinch. He didn't blink. Then it was our turn. Ethan rose first, calm, clear, measured. "We are not seeking to punish a child. We are asking that the adult who orchestrated the incident and laughed while filming share the cost of the consequences she made possible." He played the video Sophie had posted. Leo's little voice echoed through the courtroom. "These are ugly." The clink of the rings dropping, Sophie's laugh, every sound captured with perfect clarity. The room fell into that rare, undeniable silence that accompanies undeniable truth. Sophie's attorney tried to object, claiming the tone of the evidence was prejudicial. The judge overruled. "The video speaks for itself," he said simply, like a person reading water levels from a gauge. Sophie's excuses faltered under scrutiny. Her claims of jokes and minor accidents sounded hollow in the sterile clarity of the courtroom. She hadn't discouraged her son. She hadn't prevented the damage, and she had filmed it for entertainment. The judge's ruling was precise. Sophie's claim was denied. Our counterclaim was granted in full. The plumber's invoice plus the deductible payable within 30 days. Ethan slid the rescued wedding band onto my finger afterward, bent and scratched, yet shining with our story embedded in it. "We'll laugh about this one day," he whispered, "but not today." Outside the courtroom, sunlight was harsh and real. I squinted against it, but the brightness didn't hurt. It felt like clarity. Mom called, and I let it go to voicemail. She left angry, worried, practical messages. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Sophie sent one final text, "You're disgusting." Then, a week later, she requested $20 via Venmo for emotional labor. I laughed, blocked her, and exhaled. The silence that followed wasn't lonely. It was freedom. Over the following days, people in the family reached out differently. Cousin Chloe apologized. Aunt Lena sent a plant. Uncle Dean offered a quiet, sincere note. Even Dad, who had stayed quiet for decades, sent a message acknowledging his inaction in the past and including the court-ordered payment as a gesture of restitution. For the first time in years, I realized I didn't have to fix everyone else's chaos. I didn't have to absorb it, cover it, or apologize for it. I didn't have to let my life revolve around Sophie's whims, Leo's accidents, or my family's expectations. I replaced what was broken not with perfection, but with integrity. I had the bent wedding band, scarred but intact. I had Ethan, calm and unwavering. I had boundaries I could enforce. And I had myself, finally, unapologetic and visible. Sophie still posted, of course. The algorithm remained her altar. But when her laugh echoed in memory, it no longer burned. It simply informed me. It reminded me where I had been, what I had endured, and how far I had come. My life was no longer a ledger of everyone else's debts and dramas. It was mine, in scratches and scars, boundaries and choices. And slowly, gently, I began to understand that love and kindness do not require invisibility. The rings were bent, I was bent, but neither of us was broken. Weeks after the court ruling, life settled into a rhythm that felt almost foreign. No longer did I wake to the ping of last-minute requests, to the endless obligations masquerading as family duty. The space around me, both literal and emotional, was mine for the first time in years. I spent mornings reorganizing my apartment, small victories, a drawer of neatly labeled folders, a spice rack aligned perfectly, a shelf finally dusted. The bent wedding band glinted in the morning sun, a tiny emblem of resilience. I traced its scratches often, like a tactile reminder that something precious could survive a mess, that I could survive my own chaos. Ethan and I grew into a new rhythm together, not one defined by reactionary fixes or mediation, but by presence and calm steadiness. He never asked me to shrink. He never asked me to absorb the world for his comfort. When I recounted the rehearsal dinner fiasco, he listened, eyes steady, offering quiet empathy rather than grand declarations. His hand on mine became a touchstone, a reminder that support could be gentle and unwavering. Family dynamics shifted in subtle, sometimes imperceptible ways. Some relationships remained strained. Sophie was still Sophie, unpredictable and performative. But others softened. Aunt Lena's plants arrived at my door, Cousin Chloe sent occasional messages of genuine care, and even Dad started stepping in, offering small gestures of acknowledgement without expecting anything in return. I learned to say no without guilt, to decline a favor, to set boundaries, to refuse invisible labor. Each no felt like a deposit in a bank of self-respect. I discovered that love and kindness didn't require endless sacrifice. They required presence, integrity, and the courage to protect one's own space. Sometimes when I see Leo, I smile at his unfiltered curiosity and energy, but the fear and obligation that once accompanied my interactions with him are gone. I can engage without losing myself, without the need to rescue, to fix, to absorb. That space is no longer negotiable. The story of the rings, the bent, scratched, and rescued band, remains with me as a talisman. It is a lesson etched in metal. Value is not erased by misfortune, and boundaries do not diminish love. At night, I trace the scratches on the band and feel gratitude for the lessons, for Ethan, for the quiet triumphs of reclaiming my life. The laughter that once cut like a blade now flows past me, harmless, a reminder that my sense of self cannot be undermined by others' whims. Life moves forward, imperfect, but ours. The old patterns that once demanded I bend and absorb are replaced with deliberate choice. I am bent, like the ring, but not broken. I am scarred, but still whole. I am Clara Whitman, and my life is my own, defined by boundaries, by honesty, and by love that stands firm without losing its softness. Sometimes I imagine telling Leo the story one day, not to shame, but to explain resilience, to show how boundaries, courage, and steadfastness protect the things we love, how even small hands can cause big ripples, and how responsibility and integrity matter no matter the chaos. The rings are crooked, my life is crooked, and I am, for the first time, unshakably, perfectly okay with that.